If you've ever stood in your garden and thought, I'm just not good at this, then I want you to stay with me for a few minutes because your garden isn't the problem. What's holding you back is far more likely to be confidence than it is competence. So many people believe we lack the skills, the knowledge, or natural talent for gardening. But what I see time and time again is this: people stop themselves long before the plants ever get the chance to grow. I see this whether someone is growing tomatoes for the very first time or standing in the garden they've had for 20 years. The language changes slightly, but the message underneath is often the same. I don't trust myself. I'm going to get it wrong. I'll probably mess things up. I don't have green fingers. When that story is running quietly in the background of our minds, it doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how many videos you watch, or how many tools you buy. You never quite relax into the process. By the end of this video, I want you to see your garden and yourself a little differently. I spent many decades working in gardens of all shapes and sizes, from historical landscapes to small back gardens. And alongside that, I've worked with people who genuinely believe they were bad gardeners. What's fascinating is that when you slow things down and really listen, the same patterns show up time and time again. It's not in the soil and it's not in the plants, but it's how we speak to ourselves. I've lost count of the number of times that someone's apologized to me for the garden, even before I've ever stepped through the gate. They'll say things like, I know it's a mess. I'm hopeless at this. I'm not really good at this. I'm not too sure what you think or what I've done so far. I'll never get this because I'm afraid that I just won't get it right. And often what they're pointing at is simply a garden in mid-process. It's not the refined article. It's not even the finished version. And by no means is this a failure. It's just a moment in time. Plants don't see it that way at all. And this is often the moment when people relax, because it's likely that no one's ever said to them, or even to you, you're not failing, you're learning, which can bring a feeling of hope. Gardens are a living system and they're meant to change. They're meant to respond to the seasons, to the weather, to time. So when something doesn't go to plan, it doesn't mean to say that it's a personal flaw. It's just information. It's not that you've necessarily got it wrong in the garden. It's not something that you've caused for something to go wrong or to fail. And you're not failing. It's all information and you are learning. Once we begin to see it that way, you start to engage in your garden very differently. Now, many moons ago, I worked in a very public garden, which had well over 120,000 visitors each year through the growing season. And one year, the head gardener, Jimmy, he said to me, "Okay, Christian, It's now your turn to do all the planting. Now, all the planting was filling up a series of terraces with a whole load of tender perennials and some seasonal plants that wouldn't actually overwinter outdoors. Now, this was a really, really daunting task because I thought, I've never done this before. All these people will be coming to see the gardens, and what if I get it wrong? So I turned around to my head gardener, Jimmy, and I said to him, I said, Jimmy, what if I get it wrong? What if the schemes don't work out? Um, you've been doing this for 20 years. What if I don't match up to what you've created over those years? What if it just goes so badly wrong? And that the garden doesn't look quite as good as what visitors would be expecting. Even returning visitors, seeing that there'd been a difference, had the standard dropped, had the level of understanding with the planting scheme gone all awry. I just was so, so nervous. And Jimmy turned round to me and he said, well, don't worry about that. If the garden doesn't quite pan out, if an area doesn't quite work, let's not worry about it. We'll spend the year observing what you've done. We'll look at what things work and what don't work. And then we'll observe it. And let's not worry because, we can always change it next year. And I went, whew, what a sigh of relief. So, do you see? I actually wouldn't have got anything wrong. Nothing would have been a mistake. It was just going to be a growing and a learning curve for me that I had to take in order to become the gardener that I became, in order to be able to do the things that I now do in my work. So, as I say, once you begin to see it that way, your garden and you will begin to engage differently in the way that you do garden, because growing confidence grows before results. So let's just think about this. In gardening, nothing happens overnight. You don't plant a seed and question its worth because it hasn't sprouted the next day. So let's take a look at this sowing of seeds. You prepare the soil, you water, and then nothing appears. For days, you might see nothing. For some weeks, you might see nothing, or even a whole year. I've grown plants that have taken a whole year to germinate. But you don't go digging them up every morning to check if they're working. You just trust in the process. And confidence works in the same way. It's our self-talk that shapes our behaviour, and many gardeners just simply don't connect the dots between what they say to themselves to the results that they're experiencing in their gardens. And maybe this is a new concept for you as well, but let me explain a little bit about this. When you repeatedly tell yourself, I'm not good at this, I'm no good at this, you stop experimenting, you stop observing, and you stop learning. And this is where I want you to notice something. It's not the mistake that stops your growth. It's the meaning that we attach behind it. So with a few simple swaps, a little reframing of what we can say to ourselves, we can begin to change our outcomes. So let's look at some examples. That didn't work becomes I'm useless. I planted it in the wrong place becomes I can't trust to make decisions. I can't trust myself to make decisions. I should have waited becomes I always get it wrong. Now, one of those statements invites curiosity because curiosity says, what happened here? What can I notice? What might I try differently next time? And the other, well, it shuts the door completely. Because once you say something and it becomes, this is who I am, I'm no good at gardening, I always get it wrong, I planted this in the wrong place so many times, there is nowhere left for you to explore. Because as I said, once it becomes something of this is who I am, there's no room for learning. There's no space for practice because you believe that you're no good at it. There's no permission to grow because you think you'll never get it. And there's no space for patience because you simply have lost belief. And this is where gardening becomes such a powerful tool and such a powerful teacher. Because the garden doesn't respond to criticism. It responds to care, to consistency, to attention. If you turn up tense and frustrated, you've already convinced yourself that you might fail. You might have already convinced yourself that you've got to rush through something. You might have even convinced yourself that you might overcorrect things more than you need to. Or you could even convince yourself to stop listening to anything. But when you turn up curious, and even quietly curious, you'll notice what actually happens. And that shift alone can change your outcomes. The garden reflects your inner dialogue. When you begin to approach your garden with kindness, you begin to notice small wins. You allow yourself to make mistakes. You change your focus to observing instead of judging yourself. And the whole experience shifts. Your whole experience shifts. You begin to notice more. You're going to venture more into experimenting with things, stepping into your comfort zone. Oh, I said that wrong. Stepping out of your comfort zone and stepping into your adventure zone. And that's where gardening becomes fun and exciting. What new plants? Now I've got the blinding sun in my eyes. This wasn't meant to happen. What new plants can you grow? What areas can you develop? And you become more patient. Not because you're being trained, and not because you've been trained, but because you're finally allowing yourself to learn and grow as well. I'd like to pause for a moment and ask yourself this. How do you speak to yourself when something doesn't work in the garden? I mean, right now, the sun is blinding through my window, and I could be saying to myself, such not good things. Do you tell yourself that you're no good at this? That you don't have green fingers when a cutting goes wrong and it doesn't root? When a seedling doesn't germinate? Do you put your hands over your eyes and think, oh no, I've got this wrong again? Would you speak to yourself in that way? But would you speak to somebody who you're teaching? You're helping them in their gardens. Would you speak to somebody who you cared about in that way? The answer tells us a lot. And I don't think we would. We wouldn't talk to people in that way. But it's here in these moments that I want you to give yourself some grace. some grace to be kind to yourself. You're learning a whole new way of how to garden. Now, if this resonates with you, I explore it in a slightly deeper way in my up and coming podcast, and that's Growing Plants, Growing People. If you'd like more reflections like this, delivered quietly by email, my newsletter is where I share some more thoughts that don't always make it onto this video. Because growth in our gardens and growth in ourselves is almost always quieter than we expect. And just remember this: every plant grows with care, and so do you. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. Until next time, keep on growing and happy gardening, and just enjoy the blessed sunshine.